Good afternoon, Darragh McKeon. Thank you for accepting this interview with Lecturama.fr. We are pleased to ask you a few questions regarding your book Tout, solide, published by Edition Belfond. So we both...
Thank you for being here.
Okay. We both love your book.
Thank you.
And our first question, how did you get the idea for the subject of this book?
It came slowly, and I think one of the things about writing a book, because it takes so long, I think at various points in the process I realized why, looking back. So one of the reasons was that there's an Irish charity called Chernobyl Children International, which brings children from Chernobyl to Ireland. And so when I was maybe 12, they would have brought a bunch of teenagers to our hometown, and they were probably the first foreigners I'd ever met. And we were quite intrigued. The girls were very beautiful. We heard these stories about these little apartments that they lived in, which were essentially those communist tower blocks. And so I became very interested in those lives, and then I saw a documentary about Chernobyl maybe when I was 18 or 19, and the idea of people coming back to live in the villages around Chernobyl, even though they were radiated, was very strong, the sense of home.
Yeah. Your approach to Soviet society, Russian then being a partner, is very precise, showing the end of the totalitarian regime. How did you work on that subject, on these watershed years? Did you live there? Well, you answered about that. Did you meet any witnesses who did?
I did, but very late in the process. I read a lot of testimony about people who lived there at the time, but a lot of it was imagined. I really started with those communist apartments and imagined what it would be like to live in those lives. And sometimes when you find little details, you can build an entire scene or even an entire world around them. So just very small things would occur to me, and I'd find within that detail something very relevant, and then I'd build on that.
Yeah, because your fiction is quite the reality.
Yeah, I mean it's strange because it's actually quite a surreal subject.
Yeah.
So in some ways it freed me up to write with realism, because you can it has a balance of many things involved, because the subject is so strange.
We speak very rarely of Chernobyl events. You choose to place these events as background. Why did you want to write about that?
Well, ultimately it's a novel, and the beauty of the novel is that you can inhabit characters, you can inhabit a person's mind, and that's always felt more powerful to me, to live another person's life. If you talk about your own life, you are not going to talk about all the political issues that are happening at the moment. You're going to talk about your wife and your kids and your weekends. And that is people's reality.
What are Russians currently saying about this tragedy 30 years later?
There's a sense that they have, that it's all boxed up and finished, and they've dealt with it. There's a new power plant being opened in Belarus this year. I went to Belarus last year, and people don't talk about Chernobyl. I think it's too devastating to talk about, but they really hardly mention the name of the event.
Yeah.
It's really not something that people speak about.
What did you want to show concerning the handling of these events by the Soviet administration?
I think it's a little, artistically, I think it's a little dangerous to want to show anything. So I didn't come with an agenda. I was very intrigued about these people's lives, and about, living your life in the midst of extreme social change. What must that feel like? Yeah. So I'd really just all of the background issues, all of the situations, just came out of following a couple of people's lives and seeing how that would impact on just day to day.
If I am right, for me, you create your character in 3 different groups: the farmers, the surgeon, and also the Maria's and her nephew. What did you have in mind creating these three groups?
Well, they kind of came out of landscape. I think they came out of location. So I mentioned about the people who came back to Chernobyl and lived in those farms around the plant. My father is a farmer, and I understand that impulse. That sounds very strange to come back to a place that's so radiated to grow food there. But the pull of land is a very strong impulse, the pull of home, and it's a very Irish theme. So, the characters who lived around there, I became interested in seeing, well, what was their life like before the event? Mm-hmm. And then what did it feel like to live in Moscow at that time, when once you read the history, you get a sense of the fabric of the society is beginning to tear apart. And what was the texture of that? So really they all came out of their own specific location, and characters began to emerge, and then you follow that.
All the key characters have a link with Chernobyl's tragedy, except Maria. Was it for you a way via her to explore inside the Soviet regime?
Well, really it came out of, I do see the novel as largely about Chernobyl, but I see it as a novel that looks at the end of the Soviet Empire. So I see it, certainly Chernobyl is the central event, but I do see it as a novel that talks about the end of the Soviet Empire, and really it follows the end of the Soviet Empire. Something that was interesting to me was Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the Russian premier, said that Chernobyl was the catalyst that brought about the entire end of the empire. And so I kind of just followed, I became interested in Chernobyl and all the events that happened, and then one thing followed another. I kind of walked down that path to see where that led.
You choose the years 86 to 91 as a decisive transition when the Russians wanted to believe in dramatic changes in matter of freedom and economy. Mm-hmm. Do you think that they were disappointed at the end of this period?
I don't know. It's hard to speak for an entire nation. I think if you look at the social changes that happened, they happened so quickly after 1991. Before that, there was a fidelity, or there was a pretense that people were living for the communal benefit, and that was obviously not true. If you look at the black market was happening at the time, that was enormous. There's a great story about Nikita Khrushchev in the 70s, actually in the 60s, and he was known as the maize king because he once he came to power, he decided that the whole country would grow maize and that they'd replant a lot of Kazakhstan, and they'd put these maize crops around Kazakhstan, and it would help the Russian economy or the Soviet economy, would help their agriculture policy. And so he set this in place, and he even grew some in the Kremlin just to show it as a symbol. And then years later, all his clerks and bureaucrats were telling him that this was an amazing achievement and the growth rates were enormous and it was a successful policy. And one day he was flying over Kazakhstan and he looked down and he saw just desert and he said, well, where are my crops?
How long did it take you to write this book, your book?
I could give one answer which isn't entirely true. The time from beginning research to publication was 9 years.
Yeah.
But I think it would be untrue to say I was writing for 9 years. There was several years in the middle of that I'd write a little bit here and there. So I think probably 4 to 5 years of dedicated solid writing, and then a few years of getting myself around the idea that I was doing this.
Well, if you could meet any writer, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
That's a good question. I think Heraclitus, because he's very simple and very wise. I think he'd have something to say.
He's very dead.
Yeah, he's very dead. Yeah.
Do you plan to write another novel on Russia, maybe with a different historical content?
I don't know. Is the honest answer. I feel like I have an understanding of some of Russian society from all my research. That may come up again. I'm trying to get to a place where I don't consciously make decisions. I just kind of listen to whatever's happening. And the terrifying thing about the blank page, but also the very interesting thing, is you don't realize what's going to come up. But needs to come up does come up. So that may happen or it may not. I don't really know.
Okay. So thank you for this interview, Darragh.
Thank you.